Nós, estudantes de Relações Internacionais da PUC São Paulo e integrantes do grupo de estudo de conflitos internacionais, firmamos uma parceria com Democracy Now!
A partir de agora, vincularemos com legendas em português as mais importantes notícias internacionais da semana.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Our democracy is under assault, and it's under assault in the most subtle, seemingly reasonable kinds of ways that are in fact very pernicious, very racist, very class-based.
In Georgia, the Democratic candidate for governor, Stacey Abrams, who could become the first black woman governor in the country, is calling her Republican opponent, Brian Kemp, to stand down as Secretary of State for placing 53,000 voter applications on hold, 70% of them African American. We go to Georgia to speak with Professor Carol Anderson. Her new book, One Person, No Vote: How Voter Suppression is Destroying Our Democracy. Then to Florida, where a ballot initiative could restore voting rights to 1.4 million ex-felons.
You have an individual, an American citizen, waiting over 17 years after he have completed his sentence, after he has repaid his debt to society, but yet he still cannot achieve citizenship status. And that is a blow against democracy.
We'll speak with Desmond Meade, an ex-felon and voting rights advocate who's leading the charge. We'll also speak with Mother Jones senior writer Ari Berman about ballot initiatives that would ease voting restrictions in 7 states. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Saudi officials are preparing to say that after nearly 2 weeks of denials, prominent Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed by mistake during an interrogation gone wrong. The change in the official Saudi narrative over Khashoggi's disappearance came as Turkish forensic investigators wrapped up their search of Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul nearly 2 weeks after prominent journalist and Washington Post columnist entered the building and vanished. Turkish officials have said Khashoggi was tortured and murdered by a squad of 15 Saudi hitmen who dismembered his body. Video filmed outside the consulate Monday showed workers carrying buckets, mops, trash bags, and a carton of bleach into the building, hours ahead of the arrival of Turkish crime scene investigators who reported they smelled cleaning chemicals when they arrived on the scene. On Monday, President Trump said he'd spoken by phone with Saudi King Salman, who denied any knowledge of Khashoggi's whereabouts.
The king firmly denied any knowledge of it. He didn't really know. Maybe, I don't want to get into his mind, but it sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers. Who knows? We're going to try getting to the bottom of it very soon, but his was a flat denial.
Trump has claimed Saudi Arabia would suffer severe consequences if it was responsible for Khashoggi's disappearance, but he's repeatedly said the U.S. should not limit weapons sales to the kingdom. A growing number of U.S. lawmakers, including some Republicans, have called for sanctions against Saudi Arabia. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Riyadh, where he met with Saudi King Salman to discuss the disappearance of Khashoggi. Apparently, they spoke for 15 minutes. President Trump visited Florida and Georgia Monday in the wake of Hurricane Michael's destructive path, which has killed at least 19 people in the United States, with dozens still missing. Trump, who is accompanied by First Lady Melania, visited storm-ravaged towns in Florida with Republican Governor and Senate candidate Rick Scott before heading to Georgia to meet with farmers. This is Trump responding to a reporter asking if the damage caused by Hurricane Michael caused him to rethink his decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement.
I want crystal clean water. I want the cleanest air on the planet, which, by the way, now we have. It's gotten better since last year, even better. And I'm very, very tough on that. So when you talk about environmental, I am truly an environmentalist. A lot of people smile when they hear that, but I have the cleanest air, and I'm going to have the cleanest air. But that doesn't mean we have to put every one of our businesses out of business.
The Category 4 hurricane has left behind a trail of devastation, flattening entire towns and destroying homes and businesses. At least 1 million people are still without power, and the need for basic necessities is growing. Residents are speaking out on the lack of relief, reporting shortages of food, water, and medical care. Trump's tour of Hurricane Michael's devastation came after he spent much of Sunday golfing at Trump National Golf Club in Sterling, Virginia. MSNBC reports it was Trump's 210th day spent golfing since he became president. Florida prison officials say they're evacuating over 4,000 prisoners who were left stranded in dire conditions after Hurricane Michael hit. BuzzFeed News reports families of prisoners at the Gulf Correctional Institution who were not evacuated ahead of the storm reported heavily damaged infrastructure and shortages of food and water in the prison. In Georgia, where early voting in November's midterm election is already underway, election officials in Gwinnett County outside of Atlanta have rejected far more absentee ballots than any other county in the state, with nearly 1 out of 10 mail-in ballots thrown out. The move has alarmed voting rights groups who note that more than 60% of the county's residents are Latino, Black, or Asian. Georgia state officials say the ballots were rejected because of allegedly mismatched signatures, incomplete forms, or missing residential addresses. This comes as Georgia's African-American Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Stacey Abrams, has called on her Republican opponent to step down from his position as Secretary of State following an Associated Press report alleging voter suppression ahead of the election. Abrams and civil rights groups have accused Brian Kemp of using minor discrepancies in voters' registration and ID cards to bar them from casting a ballot, a system that has resulted in 53,000 voter applications being put on hold. 7 out of 10 of the stalled applications are African-American voters. After headlines, we'll spend the rest of the hour on Republican-led voter suppression efforts ahead of the midterm elections. BuzzFeed News reports the United Arab Emirates hired U.S. mercenaries to kill politicians in Yemen. The UAE hired the American mercenary company Spear Operations Group, founded by Abraham Golan, a Hungarian-Israeli living near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The group's first target in Yemen was a local leader of Al-Islah, a political party that's been labeled a terrorist group by the UAE. A top commander from Spear Operations said he could not rule out that targets could simply be someone that the UAE Crown Prince didn't like. In Syria, a Monday deadline for anti-government fighters to retreat from a buffer zone around Syria's last major rebel-held region in Idlib province has come and gone, with rebels refusing to surrender. The UN has warned a large-scale offensive could force some 800,000 people to flee and provoke a humanitarian catastrophe. Elsewhere, Syria reopened a major commercial gateway into Jordan on Monday, simultaneously reopening crossing into the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights territory. Meanwhile, the BBC has published a new investigation documenting the extent to which chemical weapons helped Syrian President Bashar al-Assad turn the tide in the war. The study found the use of chemical weapons has been widespread, with at least 106 chemical attacks since 2013, with evidence in most of the attacks pointing to the Syrian government. The New York Times reports Burma's military orchestrated a widespread Facebook misinformation and hate campaign targeting the Muslim Rohingya minority, exacerbating violence that displaced some 700,000 people in what the United Nations has called a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. The campaign involved creating troll accounts posing as Burmese celebrities and spreading false information about the Rohingya population. In August, Facebook removed the accounts of senior military leaders after coming under fire for its inaction. But the new report from the New York Times shows the extent of the misinformation is far greater than previously believed. In Nigeria, the militant group Boko Haram has killed 24-year-old Hawa Lyman, a nurse for the International Committee of the Red Cross who was kidnapped in March along with 2 other aid workers. Boko Haram killed another of the captives, Saifura Ahmed, in September. Boko Haram has killed over 20,000 people and kidnapped thousands, including many children, and fighting between the group and government forces has displaced some 2 million people since 2009. A caravan of 1,600 Honduran migrants fleeing violence and poverty are headed for the U.S. border. The caravan, which includes families with small children, crossed into Guatemala Monday, where they were met with police at the border. After a 2-hour standoff, the massive group was able to keep going as they make their way north toward Mexico. This is mother of 4, Andrea Alaman.
There are no work opportunities here. One has to look for the best.
How many children are you traveling with?
With 4. And we're heading to the United States. We're going to arrive with Donald Trump. He has to receive us just as we receive the Americans over here. They will have to accept us over there.
Last week, Vice President Mike Pence urged the leaders of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala to tell their citizens to not attempt the journey to the U.S. Reports suggest the Trump administration is considering resuming family separations at the U.S.-Mexico border. In southwestern France, at least 12 people are dead after a powerful storm brought the equivalent of 7 months' worth of rain in just a few hours, flooding whole villages, forcing authorities to evacuate residents trapped on rooftops. The floods are the worst to hit the area in over a century. They came as meteorologists said exceptionally warm seawater along the Mediterranean coast added to the storm's ferocity. The increased ocean temperatures are consistent with global warming caused by human activity. Back in the United States, President Trump said Monday he would not apologize for repeatedly using a racial slur, saying Pocahontas to describe Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren. Trump's comments came after he denied earlier on Monday that he never offered to donate $1 million to Senator Warren's favorite charity if a DNA test proved her claims of Native American ancestry. Video of a July 5th Trump rally in Montana shows the president said exactly as much. Senator Warren has said her mother told her she was had Cherokee and Delaware ancestors. On Monday, she released a DNA test that provides strong evidence of Native American lineage in her family tree dating back 6 to 10 generations. She also released a video about her family heritage with comments from former colleagues who said she never claimed Native ancestry when applying for jobs.
Do you remember her heritage ever coming up during the hiring process?
No. Her heritage had no bearing on her hiring, period.
I was chairing the committee that year. If ethnicity had been part of the discussion, I would have known about it.
Her name with respect to racial minority hires, no, never.
The controversy comes as many Native Americans have criticized Senator Warren's use of a DNA test. Chuck Hoskin, Jr., Secretary of State of the Cherokee Nation, said, quote, sovereign tribal nations set their own legal requirements for citizenship, and while DNA tests can be used to determine lineage, such as paternity to an individual, it's not evidence for tribal affiliation. Using a DNA test to lay claim to any connection to the Cherokee Nation or any tribal nation, even vaguely, is inappropriate and wrong, he said. Last month, Senator Warren said at a town hall meeting she would take a hard look at a 2020 presidential run after the midterms. And a new report from Stanford University shows 99.7% of public comments made to the FCC were in favor of preserving net neutrality. The study looked at 800,000 unique comments that were submitted last year after FCC Chair Ajit Pai unveiled a plan to roll back net neutrality, reversing Obama-era rules, barring corporate service providers from blocking access to websites, slowing down content, or providing paid fast lanes for Internet service. Last month, the Justice Department sued California after Governor Jerry Brown signed the state's own net neutrality bill into law. A number of legal challenges have been filed in response to the net neutrality repeal, including a lawsuit backed by 23 state attorneys general. Those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I will give you $1 million
to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian, you know.
After years of mocking by Donald Trump, Senator Elizabeth Warren releases a DNA test showing Native American ancestry.
Trump can say whatever he wants about me, but mocking Native Americans or any group in order to try to get at me, that's not what America stands for.
We'll speak with the Boston Globe's Annie Linsky, who examined hundreds of documents to determine ethnicity was not a factor in Elizabeth Warren's rise in law. But many Native Americans are criticizing Senator Warren's use of a DNA test to prove Native American lineage. We'll host a roundtable discussion with Ojibwe lawyer Tara Hauska, Indian Country Today editor Mark Trahant, and Jossie Ross, an author and member of the Blackfeet Nation. And we'll look at the record number of Native American women running for office in the midterm elections. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United States received a $100 million payment from Saudi Arabia Tuesday, the same day Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and his father, King Salman, in Saudi Arabia to discuss the disappearance of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. While the $100 million payment had been brokered earlier this summer and is related to U.S. military efforts in Syria, the timing of its delivery appeared highly suspicious, with one U.S. official telling the New York Times, quote, "The timing of this is no coincidence." Turkish officials have said Khashoggi was tortured and murdered by a squad of 15 Saudi hitmen who dismembered his body. Video and audio recordings from inside the consulate reportedly show Khashoggi was beaten, tortured, and beheaded with his fingers cut off, his body dismembered. This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo speaking about his visit to Saudi Arabia on the tarmac in Riyadh.
They made no exceptions to who they would hold accountable. They were very clear. They understand the importance of this issue. They're determined to get to the bottom of it, and that they will conduct the report, and we'll all get a chance to see it. They each promised that they would achieve that for us.
Did they say that Mr. Khashoggi is alive or dead?
I don't want to talk about any of the facts. They didn't want to either, in that they want to have the opportunity to complete this investigation in a thorough way.
Khashoggi's suspected murder has caused a diplomatic crisis between the United States and Saudi Arabia, particularly for Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner, who has close ties to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This is Kushner refusing to answer a CBS reporter's questions on a flight on Tuesday.
Hey, Jared, Carol Burnett with CBS. Any comment on... I don't give a thing who you are. It's a time and place.
Service later had to defend the service for how its agents handled the incident, saying they did not intend to impede media access. Kushner has cultivated an extremely close relationship with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, dining with him in Washington and Riyadh and hosting one-on-one phone calls with him outside of normal diplomatic channels. The death toll from Category 4 Hurricane Michael has risen to 29 people as search and rescue efforts continue a week after the devastating storm flattened parts of the Florida Panhandle. As many as 160,000 homes and businesses across the southeast United States still have no power. Over 1,000 people are still living in emergency shelters. Hurricane Michael was one of the most powerful storms ever to strike the U.S. mainland. Meteorologists say it was supercharged by warmer than usual water in the Gulf of Mexico. In economic news, President Trump's asking federal departments to slash 5% from their budgets amidst the swelling national deficit. The military could see a smaller cut, going from $716 billion to $700 billion, a decrease of only 2.3% from the current budget, which is the largest defense authorization in history. In response to Trump's plan, former Deputy Secretary of Labor Christopher Liu tweeted, "That's a 5% cut for veterans, national security, law enforcement, health care, farmers, roads, bridges, workers, environment, food, and housing aid, everything. And it would still only amount to $60 billion a year, a fraction of the $1.5 trillion Trump GOP tax cut," he tweeted. Canada became the second country in the world after Uruguay to legalize recreational marijuana Wednesday. The Canadian government says it will also move to pardon people who've previously been convicted of low-level marijuana possession. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says the new law in Canada will not affect existing marijuana laws in the U.S. and that anyone crossing the border could face marijuana-related questioning. Canadians who receive pardons for marijuana-related offenses could also be deemed inadmissible to enter into the United States. In Crimea, a gunman killed 19 and wounded dozens more at a university in the Russian-annexed territory Wednesday. Authorities say the shooter was an 18-year-old student from the school who attacked his classmates before killing himself. The attack is the deadliest instance of school violence in the region since the 2004 Beslan terror attack, which killed 333 people, most of them children. This is a school administrator speaking after the attack.
There were many bodies, children's bodies. It was a real act of terrorism. They burst inside the college, right? 5 or 10 minutes after I left, someone burst inside and blew everything up. All the windows blew out. They blew up the hall. Then they were running around and throwing some explosive packages. Then they were running around and holding guns. I don't know exactly what weaponry. On the second floor, they were opening classes and were killing everyone whom they managed to find, whom they saw. Everyone is ours. It's a real terror act, just like Beslan.
CNN is reporting based on satellite imagery Russia's building up its military installations in Kaliningrad, a key Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea. The reported military buildup is part of growing tensions between Russia and NATO. This comes after reports earlier this year that Russia had upgraded a nuclear weapons storage facility in Kaliningrad. The Israeli military bombed the Gaza Strip Wednesday, killing at least one Palestinian man, injuring over a dozen more people. Gaza's health ministry says the Israeli air raids killed 25-year-old Naji Ahmad al-Zanin and injured at least 6 children as they were on their way to school in central Gaza. Israel claims the bombing campaign was in retaliation for a rocket allegedly fired from Gaza into Israel, which struck a home, causing no injuries. In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed unveiled his new cabinet Tuesday, appointing women to a record 50% of positions. Ethiopia now becomes one of the first African nations and one of the only few countries worldwide with gender parity in ministerial positions. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, an estimated 200,000 people are returning to the southern Kasai region after being expelled from neighboring Angola. Congolese officials and migrants say dozens have been killed this month as part of the forced migration. Meanwhile, in the northeastern part of the DRC, an outbreak of Ebola has killed at least 24 people over the last week. Back in the U.S., the Police Accountability Office in the city of Chicago has released footage of off-duty police officer Khalil Muhammad shooting unarmed African-American teenager Ricardo Hayes last year. The video directly contradicts Officer Muhammad's claim that the shooting followed an escalated encounter and appeared to be pulling out a gun, instead showing the officer chasing after Hayes in his car before shooting directly at him as he appeared to calmly take a few steps toward the vehicle with his arms by his side. Hayes has autism, adding to recent questions over police handling of people with mental and developmental disabilities. Muhammad is currently on administrative leave while the incident is being investigated. The Justice Department conducted an investigation into the Chicago Police Department after the shooting and killing of unarmed African-American teenager Laquan McDonald that showed that Chicago police are 14 times more likely to use force against young black men than white men. In more police violence news, the family of Chinedu Okobi, a black Bay Area man who was killed by police after being tasered, is demanding answers. 36-year-old Okobi was killed on October 3rd in San Mateo County, California, after he reportedly disrupted traffic, resulting in a deadly encounter with a police officer. But details about the killing remain unknown. Okobi's family said he suffered from mental illness. A Prince George's County, Maryland police officer appeared in court Wednesday after being charged with raping a woman during a traffic stop October 11th. The woman says she believes Officer Ryan Macklin attacked her after he learned she's undocumented. A Pennsylvania Catholic priest pleaded guilty on Wednesday to sexually abusing 2 boys. Prosecutors say Reverend David Lee Paulson sexually abused an altar boy in the church and made him confess afterward, as well as assaulting him and attempting to assault another boy at hunting camp. Paulson was arrested and charged in May following the explosive Pennsylvania grand jury investigation into systematic, widespread sexual abuse in the church. Former USA Gymnastics president Steve Penny has been arrested on charges of tampering with evidence in the case of Larry Nassar, the former USA Gymnastics doctor who's been convicted of sexually abusing hundreds of women and girls. Penny is accused of removing documents linked to the case from the USA Gymnastics National Team Training Center. If convicted, he could face up to 10 years in prison. And in Georgia, a bus carrying African-American senior citizens to a polling place in Jefferson County was stopped Monday, all passengers told to get off, after a county clerk raised concerns about the bus and the organizers' political motivations. The bus trip was organized by the nonpartisan group Black Voters Matter. The senior citizens were on their way to cast their ballots on the first day of early voting in Georgia. This is co-founder Cliff Albright in a video released by Black Voters Matter.
Somebody called the commission, the county commission, to complain because they saw all these black folks get on this big black bus. It's the blackest bus in America. Somebody drove past, saw that, got nervous, got mad, called the county commission's office, which then called the center. And the bottom line was all the folks who had just got on the bus. And the bus was full. This is a 50-passenger bus full of folk had to come off the bus.
This comes as Georgia's Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams is calling for her Republican opponent, Brian Kemp, to step down as Secretary of State following allegations of widespread voter suppression. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Nosso programa fica por aqui. Você pode acompanhar a gente pela página do Facebook e pelo blog do GS Terra em Transe. Nos vemos na próxima semana. Até lá!
Economia é uma esquina de várias ciências, né? Na bolsa, se alguém comprou Petrobras, quer dizer que alguém vendeu Petrobras. Então quer dizer que essas duas pessoas têm opiniões radicalmente diferentes sobre a mesma coisa no mesmo momento do tempo. Então o mercado financeiro ele permite uma amplitude de opiniões muito grande. Então se você não tiver muitas ferramentas para lidar com essa complexidade, você não consegue. Então, nesse sentido, um curso bom como é o curso de Economia da PUC São Paulo, que passa por diversas áreas do conhecimento, tanto na heterodoxia, quanto na ortodoxia, quanto em outras escolas mais sociológicas de pensamento econômico, permite sim que você desenvolva esse bom senso para fazer o trabalho direito no mercado de capitais. A vida social dentro da PUC, a vida acadêmica, a vida de movimento estudantil é muito rica, né? E acabou me capturando, né? Acabei entrando no movimento estudantil, virei presidente do centro acadêmico do Leão 13, né? Meu nome é André Perfeito, sou economista, chefe da Gradual Investimentos e fiz PUC São Paulo.